Suppose that all worlds, all universes met in a single nexus, a single pylon, a tower, and within it a stairway, perhaps rising to the Godhead itself. Would you dare climb to the top, Gunslinger?
Welcome back to the Reign of Books podcast, where the written page reigns supreme all the time, always. This is the reader's entry into great narratives. I am John Keel, joining you from the War Room. As usual, my co-host is Josh Preston, joining you from the Mini Hyrule Cube. The Mini Hyrule Cube. Apparently that's a permanent place he's broadcasting from now. And we are on the second part of The Gunslinger, the first book in the Dark Tower series. But before we get into that, Josh, today's show is brought to you by Pacifying Palathering Incorporated. Are chatty neighbors taking up your time with their palathering? Are you involved with a court case with a lot of legal mumbo-jumbo and palathering? Attending a business meeting with a lot of palathering PowerPoint presentations? Planning on having a 10-year sit-down and palather with a man you've been trying to kill your entire life? Who has time for this? Call Pacifying Palathering Incorporated. The double P. PP. One of our trained representatives will take your place at that presentation and absorb the palathering for you. Don't let that neighbor take your personal time. Call in PP on that situation. Our representatives are trained in neighborly responses like, well, that's really nice. Tell your wife I said hi. Oh, that's right, your son is in 10th grade now. But we don't stop there. Court case responses include, I object. The counsel is palathering the witness. And for business meetings, we are prepared to provide golf clapping each time your boss makes a point. Dealing with palathering in your life? Call Pacifying Palathering Incorporated today. PP! And Josh, we're pretty excited to have these guys on as a sponsor. They're probably going to be a one-time sponsor. That's okay. Their money's good.
Well, you know, I had a couple of palatherers today that I just had to walk away from. I'm glad you taught me how to pronounce that correctly. And if people don't know, this is not a Western. It's kind of a Western fantasy book, and that was a big word. I love that word, and I didn't know there was the peepees out there. That word.
I told you it was a low point in our sponsorship, and I'm fine with it.
No, this is a spoiler cast, and we are in part 2 of the Gunslinger. This is the conclusion to book 1 of 7 of the Dark Tower series. So if you haven't read the book or want to listen from the beginning, go to the previous episode. But this was a really good one, John. I've got to say, there's a lot to discuss in this book. Even a 250, 280-page short story, Stephen King can pack in a lot. But before we get to the conclusion and find out what is driving the gunslinger to kill his sworn lifelong enemy, let's jump into some news in publishing and fiction. The first story is a column in The Guardian from Will Self, and he proclaims in big bold letters that the novel is dead, and this time it's for real. He says literary fiction used to be central to the culture, but no more. In the digital age, not only the physical book is in decline, but the very idea of difficult reading is being challenged. He basically says that, of course, all the schlock, kidult, boy wizardom, and soft what's the word? Misogynistic fantasy is doing well. That's booming. But serious novels are either not being written, read, or both. So this is an interesting column. It sparked a lot of response from other corners of the publishing world, other authors. But he basically says it's just a retreat from difficult ideas, people not wanting to do anything that I guess challenges them. Another way that I would say it is mediocrity. People just want to look for the simplest story, and I hope he's wrong. And a lot of people say he is wrong, but that is a column worth reading in the Guardian if you want to take a look and challenge yourself. I would say, what's the solution? Well, of course, go to Gutenberg and just read all the classics for free. Problem solved. Gutenberg.org, if no one knows. Free ebooks, and of course LibriVox, a lot of free audiobooks. So there's your solution. And the classics will live on in posterity, if not and any new ones written in the future.
I object to this columnist palathering. Josh, our next story is also from The Guardian. Authors' income collapse to, they say, abject levels. And actually, it sounded like they were abject anyway. Basically, the survey has found the median annual earnings for writers who do that full time, and they gave this in British numbers, but £11,000. They say down 29% since 2005. Again, this is from The Guardian. Ouch. And all I can say is full-time writing really just, is this just becoming a part-time job now? Is writing something you can just do on the side? There's many people that read books, and there's still a lot of us out there. So how can it be so low? I guess the days of these mighty authors, these Tom Clancy's and others, is coming to an end, according to this article.
Well, I can't complain. I complain grievously about movie ticket prices soaring, inflating. In books, I'm always looking for the cheapest ebook, and I don't hardly buy the Dead Tree versions anymore. The point is, if it's a really popular story, supply and demand dictates, hey, the writer can get a higher payday. But a lot of people in this digital age, not just digital age, come on, with the Gutenberg press, anybody could write, anyone could, mass produce. So this is just a sign of changing times. This is the nature of the beast. With self-publishing, with easier distribution channels, with a glut of novels. So it is what it is, right? I don't sound like I have any sympathy toward writers. I do. I'm just saying that this is the nature. This is the nature of the economy and of society, being able to buy things. Books are commodities. They can buy them cheap. So
I think the issue here, though, is that we're not rewarding authors with really original ideas coming in. And I know you can get published through the major publishing houses and make some decent money there. However, I would say even then, the authors still aren't making the money they should be making. And I would hate to see the lack of income end up equaling the lack of interest in that type of career.
No, you're right. Some great stories might not be written, or they could be written by robots or computers in the future. But that's another story for another decade. The last story, and we do have more news sources than The Guardian, but they spread their love to books. So The Guardian also reported on authors revealing how to write or why they write pen names for themselves. And it was just a fun little read about basically in this age of branding, the author is not just the works that they write, but creating a brand for themselves. It's it's the age of sharing. It's the age of connecting to your readers in more deeply than you have before. So you have these connected audiences, and a pen name could help with your privacy. There's actually I love the article for the fact that it said it actually shields writers from readers who get too close, who write more personal reviews and kind of comment on writers' political views and not just the literary work. So again, conversations are two-way. Anyway, so pen names aren't new though, right? It talks about pen names can help people who are trying to kind of like if you write adult books or you write kid books and you don't want to be known as this person who writes adult and kid books. Yeah. The parents would never buy your books again, your kid stuff. So you can have two brands. So anyway, interesting story, and I'm going to start looking for my pen name. What would your pen name be, John, if you are writing novels and you haven't told us?
Paul Palatherman.
All right, and on that note, PP. Okay, that's when we'll start calling you PP. We are finishing up The Dark Tower, Book 1, which is called The Gunslinger. I just like saying Stephen King's dark fantasy series, The Dark Tower. As redundant as it is, I can see why it's a dark fantasy series. And, John, I was happy midway through up until the end. We're finishing the second half. It didn't get too creepy or scary or just flat out, Stephen King's spooky. He really has created, a type of story that is shrouded in epic mystery and really examines the motivations of his characters. I absolutely loved it. Loved it. And at the end we'll recap. You have to wait till the end to hear a recap of the whole book, and if we'll continue down this road, because there's so many series you can read these days, and this is an old series, 22 years. So you really have to be careful, especially us. We don't read like books like every day, and we don't shoot up and spit them out. We let them, what's the word? We let them kind of soak
Bake?
and bake. I was thinking more of the steak terminology. Marinate.
Yes, we let them marinate.
We let them marinate, and then we talk about them as intelligently as we can. We're not literary fiction critics, people, so bear with us, okay?
Speak for yourself, Josh.
All right, you go for the deeper conversation. I'll just try to. I'll keep up with you if I can.
Look, here's something I want to say right at the beginning about this story. I was delighted when I realized that this indeed was well, this is not the right term. Post-apocalyptic is not quite the right term. However, this is beyond, I mean, generations, hundreds of generations beyond current day. Okay, the Earth has moved on, and I love that about the story. I love it. We're traveling through what's left, and this is not the first time I have seen this. Back in the 70s, I believe Terry Brooks put out a book called The Sword of Shannara, and he had the same concept. Everything that was present day had just been destroyed, and eventually the fantastical and the magical and all these other things started to take over until you were basically in the world of Tolkien and the world that Terry Brooks created, and we kind of see the same thing here, but it's way more weird, and I love it. I just want to say that right up front. I was delighted when I realized that it was way into the future.
This might show my greenness to the fantasy genre, but you're right. That's not a big spoiler to say it, but we kind of got to ease into that because that's part of Stephen King not letting you know exactly where is the gunslinger. What is he doing? What is he, the last man on Earth? They call it Endworld, and it's nothing but this desolate landscape. And there's a couple of weird things happen. We didn't really go into depth, but let me say real quick: in science fiction, you obviously have this concept of 1,000 years in the future. Here's what society looks like. We have all these modern flying spacecraft. So this take in a fantasy book goes in another direction. It talks about the rise and fall of civilizations, and it really doesn't say, okay, we are in the future, and this is where we're at. It takes more of a fantasy, kind of mythical take on it, and there's weird stuff happening, right? A lot of weird things.
But isn't that really the point? Stephen King never said it. He showed you in the book. He took you through different scenes, and you put two and two together, and that is the best way when you're writing. That is the best way to let the reader figure it out. It challenges my mind, and that moment of aha, because he didn't write out say, "Oh, we're just way into the future." He's not an amateur writer. It's well done.
It's really intentional, yeah, and so we're going to actually see the few examples that make, at least for me, connect the dots, and I was like, wow. But we catch up in the middle of the story where Jake is the boy. One of the weird things in the book is how this boy literally pops out of nowhere in the middle of the desert. He's like a mirage, and he saves the gunslinger. So the boy came from modern-day New York, out of nowhere. The man in black, who the gunslinger is pursuing, put the boy in his path. He essentially killed him, and so the boy came here. Is this his afterlife? How does it work? It's all very weird how these traps that the man in black is laying for the gunslinger manifest themselves. But Jake's a real living, breathing person, and the gunslinger feels obligated to him. And they walk out of the desert which has been predominant in the whole first part of the book, which it nearly killed the gunslinger. Man versus nature, and he was not going to win. But they walk out of the desert, and they slowly come to what's essentially a lush jungle, this place full of life compared to where they've been. But they set up camp, and things get really weird really quick because the whole fantasy element of the book kind of asserts itself full force. Up until now, it's kind of been hiding on the fringes. But the kid sleepwalks. Jake sleepwalks, and something kind of, it's not just fantastical, it's really weird because the boy comes across this ancient Stonehenge type place, and in the middle there's this demon or this oracle that's bodiless. It's like a spirit. You can't see it. It's just this manifestation of something attacking him. and the gunslinger barely saves the kid. So, this gunslinger has this person to look after, and he pulls out his jawbone. If we remember talking about the scary demon jawbone, it's
which
just,
I still don't get 100%. I mean, I understand what it did, but why? I don't know.
yeah, the jawbone is kind of like this oracle. It's part of the earth, and they just come across it. It's like a wild animal. They come across it, and so it's not super deep, and there's not a lot of background. But the jawbone works in his favor. It helps ward off this other evil demon that's possessing the boy, and they walk out of the Stonehenge, stones, whatever, and they leave. And so basically, I like the language that King says here. The gunslinger has this big backstory. We don't know what it is, and the jawbone, he operates on instinct. That's what King says. So operating on instinct, he pulls it out, and he was never afraid to operate on instinct. So you got to know this guy's been through a lot of things, and he's survived this far in his life through the wilderness when others, countless others, have been destroyed at the end of the world. And so it's kind of cool to get those nuggets there. But then what does he do, John? He goes back to the spirit.
Yeah, and like everything else in the book, he has to have sex to get what he wants.
Well, it doesn't even. It's not even just sex by itself. He actually he takes drugs. You can tell what era this is written in. This is kind of random, but this is the way. There's motivation here. This isn't gratuitous or graphic. It's not graphic at all by itself. But he doesn't just throw this in here as kind of like a shock element. It's the fact that he's got to find answers about the black man. The man. That's his new nickname.
Oh, we went there. Okay.
The man in black. He's got to find answers. He's done a lot of bad things up till now to get answers. He basically has been searching for this guy for 12 years at least. But he goes on his drug, and the oracle tells him some interesting things. He defiles himself. She's like a siren, from Greek mythology. She'll suck him dry, and he'll probably leave him for dead. So it's like, whoa, he's got to, he took the drug so he could stay fully aware, so he wouldn't sit there and meet his end. But he knows the oracle can help him, and it's awesome. Is it worth the price of admission? Yes, because the boy, the oracle says the boy is the gate to the black man. Man in black.
Yeah. Just keep going with that thread. That's okay.
The man in black is the gate to the three, and the three is the way to the dark tower. So we have the hunt, the perpetual hunt for the man in black, but the ultimate pursuit is the dark tower. So the oracle basically says, okay, you need the boy, and then you'll meet these three. So I thought it was interesting. We started to get our first mythology here, and about who are these three, who's gonna help him in his quest. What is this all about? But there's a lot of moral quandaries here, aren't there, John? I mean, he doesn't want to sacrifice the boy, but what it turns out is it's looking like the boy's gonna, have to be given up. He's gonna have to, be sacrificed again.
Yeah. Then the gunslinger starts kind of detaching himself from the boy at this point, and I didn't. I want to compliment the story all the time, but that won't be possible. I didn't really understand why we had to have the gunslinger become attached to the boy in the first place if he was going to so quickly afterwards detach himself. Kind of didn't quite get that, or it didn't flow as well as I thought it should have. But there were a couple other things I picked up from this scene besides really the point that Stephen King was trying to make, and really wanted to comment more about his writing. I liked how throughout the entire story we would come into a scene, we would take a pause, and then go back in time to learn a little bit more about the gunslinger's past. And we never got too mired down in that. We would always come back to the present, but everything you learned about the past always mattered to what was going on right then. It was all character development. I love the way Stephen King paced it. And something else I liked is there was a scene when he was talking with Jake before he went back and took his drug and defiled himself with the oracle, and it mentioned that he was cleaning his guns, and the name of the book is The Gunslinger, and this type of story, and I'm judging this based on a lot of Hollywood movies, it should be very easy for the writer to get bogged down in focusing on those pistols, right? the guns, the gunslinger, but he never does. He never really. Those guns are a very important part of the story, but he doesn't make them a character in the story, and I think that's worth noting because I think that's a big mistake a lot of writers and even movie script writers make when you have a story that has this kind of content in it.
Yeah, you're right. He compartmentalizes the story very well. What I mean by that is the flashbacks that show his coming of age. He definitely earns those weapons, and I love how at the right place and the right time, he tells that story to Jake. So, everything this in the book is intentional. It has a purpose, and I love the fact that, like you said, he attached himself to Jake too quickly, and that was a little, hanky-janky. But in the book, as they go further down the road, you see the dependency on each other, and it's smoothed out much more nicely. Even in this next part, we're done here with the Oracle, and they start climbing the mountain, and there are certain parts of the mountain, the impasse is that the gunslinger would have been stuck. He actually literally physically couldn't climb like the boy could. Jake was young and I guess more nimble and lighter, and it said that. So we know he has this moral conflict of, I can't turn back. The Oracle said, you can turn back, strike your camp, turn back northwest. There's still need for gunmen like you. And the Oracle said, that's your way out. And he said, no, I can't. So we know there's a confrontation coming. We know there's a decision he'll have to make. But like you said, we have to find out, is it that hard of a decision? You barely know, Jake, but they go on. And the first thing that happens when they go on is, the help that the boy helps him get to the Man in Black. They're so close, John, because he's closer than he's ever been in 12 years. They actually get to a huge granite impasse. This is kind of a nice little build-up. The boy is scared to death. He actually tells the gunslinger, he's figured it out. He said, I know you don't need me. You're going to kill me. And the gunslinger lies to his face and says, no, I'm not. That in itself is kind of abrupt, but we're trying to get the emotions of the characters, This is going to happen. We know where each other stands. You're just in denial. Because the reason he says this is because he doesn't want the gunslinger to have to make that decision. He wants to go back, but they do round the corner, and after 12 years they finally get to the Man in Black. He's standing underneath the giant granite wall, the end of the giant mountainous pass with the waterfall coming down, and he's this, he's a mocking character. He's laughing and clapping or whatever. He's like, bravo, you found me. And
the gunslinger fires and he misses all 3 times.
His hands, yeah. You mentioned that Stephen King doesn't obsess over the weapons, but this is interesting. We earlier found out his power with his weapons. It's like almost this mechanical, autonomous living thing that he fires, and they'll always hit their target, or they'll do what they want. They know what's right. They don't have any moral ambiguity. The guns know who's bad, and they'll shoot to kill, right? But the guns do miss, and he has to force them down. Basically, I found that interesting. I found that really interesting.
Yeah, did you pick up at this point in the book that the gunslinger was, and I'm gonna wait. I have a bigger comment to make. I'll wait till the end as we're doing our wrap up. But did it feel like the gunslinger was kind of going with the flow the whole time?
How do you mean going with the flow? I think he was torn right down the middle.
It seemed like he knew the Man in Black was setting traps for him the whole way, and he knew he just kind of had to go with it because he was pursuing this Man in Black, and he just kept going with the flow.
Yeah, King is trying to make us understand. I think we fully understand at the end. He has a sworn obligation to find the tower. We don't know why. We don't know why he's the last person out of Gilead, or however you pronounce his home country. He's all by himself, and he's been pursuing this guy for 12 years. So yeah, he's going with the flow, but I think he has little choice. There's all those clues about how the Man in Black has his soul in his pocket. I think that was a quote from the end of chapter 2. I mean, basically, there's a lot going on here, and we do need to get to the end to kind of see this play out. But the Man in Black basically slips away from them, and the gunslinger's kind of like he's a junkie. He's like, he's like, I was right there. The Man in Black said, we'll palaver or palaver.
Palather.
plather. We'll plather everywhere for hours or years on the other side, but just the two of us, which we keep on. The reader is kept being reminded that we have to come to a decision about Jake. He's not going to get away easy. He's going to have to sit here and decide, is he willing to sacrifice Jake, basically, over finding out this lifelong pursuit, obsession. But they go into the blackest of black caves, under the mountain.
And the book actually says, and the darkness swallowed them. I loved that quote because it did when he made that choice to continue pursuing the man in black. I mean, didn't it really feel like darkness swallowed him, not just figuratively, but not just literally, but figuratively as well?
I think you're way ahead of me there, Mr. Literary Critic. That was a beautiful way to, I guess, foreshadow this. Even at the end, it's funny that you caught that at the beginning, because at the end, I think I was rereading it. So when they were about to exit, and this is jumping the gun, but he said the evil flowers. He would hope the evil flowers of his mind would wither in the sunlight, and he could maybe be easier to find another way and not let Jake get killed or sacrificed. So it's funny. I think Stephen King put allusions on both ends of the pass under the mountain there for us, because the gunslinger's like trying to fight his own demons. But I love under the mountain because they lose track of time. They're literally going for days and days, and the man in black is still manipulating things here because they're following a river. They think they can get through by following the river, but it's taking forever on foot. But they find a railway, and then they follow the railway, and then they slap their head. Jake almost conks out on a hand car, the old-fashioned, like you see in the westerns. I loved it. They had to have the western tie-in here, and they get this hand car that talks to them. And you're like, a talking hand car. See, there's a bunch of weirdness going on here, and I was like,
this is the point that you realize they're in a subway. They're in some kind of underground rail car system. And you start seeing these signs, and then you hear about he gets delighted because he sees a bunch of weapons, but actually all the barrels have been filled with lead. But I'm going, oh wow, But when that finally started coming together in my head where they were, and I mentioned it already, but I have to mention it again, I got really excited. I love these types of stories because you don't know what's coming at you now.
Exactly, that's the best way of putting it. I had no idea, but that scene, and we'll get to that scene. You're right. I didn't make the connection that Jake said this is a subway. And the gunslinger's like, what's that? And Jake, who's quickly losing his memory, everybody's losing their short-term memories, long-term memories. He's like, I don't know, but I know it's called a subway. But this talking hand car, I didn't even think about it. It was an intercom system, but it was on a hand car. And they go down full speed, and they still lose track of time. But again, I told you earlier, this is the perfect, Stephen King is intentional with how he lets the characters open up and they form their relationships, and you see the character development. It's just not random. And in this dark place with nothing to do, the gunslinger and Jake both have a lot of time on their hands to think. And this is when you learn of Roland's coming-of-age story. His name is Roland, and that's the gunslinger has an awesome coming-of-age story. His father was going to be
he was the king.
He was the king. He was the lead gunslinger. Lord of Gilead, however, whatever
New
title
Canaan,
he had.
I think it was New Canaan. I can't remember the exact title.
That was the city, in Gilead. But there was a war brewing, and we knew this earlier in their training that when they were training to be gunslingers, we kind of got a hint that war was coming, or that there was a division. But his father, as powerful as he was, his wife was an adulteress. And it was with a very evil advisor, an advisor right to his father. And this incensed Roland, the gunslinger. He was 14 years old. So we know their training was hard. And he's telling this whole story to Jake. He's opening up to Jake. I can't remember exactly what Jake wanted to know. He wanted to know how he became a gunslinger, or how you guys...
that was it. It was just simple, how did you come of age? Because that had come up several times with them.
Yeah, and it's a heck of a story because the kid shows him at an early age. It shows that he is not willing for people to do wrong, or he's not willing for people to disrespect his dad. I mean, he was of the high speech, or the highborn, and he was going to be a gunslinger, and he knew his purpose in life, and he knew he wasn't going to fail. But this whole affair that his mother had made him go berserk when Martin wouldn't defer to him and show his allegiance. He basically just he fluffed him off. And Roland, his father was away fighting. He decided to do his trial by combat right then, age 14, and what that entailed was going to his trainer and going to challenge him, like pull off the glove and throw down the gauntlet. And basically, Court, he's this grizzled, old, scary dude with a bunch of battle scars, and he can crack your neck in a second. He's the one who beat them mercilessly in all their training. And Roland busts down the door and says, I challenge you. He said, today, you stop teaching me. I'm the teacher, or something awesome. It was an awesome quote.
Well, but the point here in this part of the story is that he was never guaranteed to be a gunslinger. If he had challenged his master and then not defeated him, he would have been exiled, king's son or no. And I loved it because these guys were like the special of the special forces. I mean, and you can see it from the way he fights. I mean, just incredible. And then when he did finally earn his guns, and when Stephen King tells you in the story that no one really has guns. If you have guns, you are the most highly trained of everyone. It really meant something to be the gunslinger, and I like the way he established that character. He wasn't just some, awesome, tough action hero. He was really something to be feared.
Yeah, the symbolism of the importance of gunslingers in their society was made pretty clear. Basically, if you won in your trial by combat, you went out the East Gate toward enlightenment, toward the world, because it was open to you, and you would sit here and you could go anywhere you wanted to. But if you lost, you went to the West, and you essentially, even no matter how high your station, you'd essentially become a servant and just go and be forgotten. So you get one weapon in this trial by combat, and I love this here because it connected the dot earlier. There was this simple flashback about when they were training the Hawk, David the Hawk. And then birds of prey are vicious, and basically he chose David, who's an old grandpa hawk at this age. He chose David, and he said, "What's it going to be, boy? What's it going to be? Are you going to give your life for me?" Basically, because this bird was trained to kill, and he could handle him. And so Court didn't know what to expect. They got on this field, and I love it because it's just the other boys there. It's supposed to be a big to-do, but this is not announced. This was like out of the blue, so there's no spectators. This is usually a big spectator event. And Court says, "Who'd you bring, or what'd you bring?" And it's the Hawk. And basically, this is a big gambit because if it fails, Roland will probably get killed or maimed pretty badly. I mean, Court's pretty vicious, this instructor, and it's awesome because the bird, he does his job. I think
appropriately named David as well because he took down the giant Court.
Yes.
And the bird did take down Court. I mean, Roland threw a few blows in there, but the bird really did that heavy work. And I'm telling you honestly, real talk here, it did hurt my heart when that bird was killed because the way Stephen King described it was unrelenting. It was brutal, and that bird got crushed and killed, and it gave itself for its master, and it was kind of rough to read that part of the book for me.
I remember that. I remember thinking that the bird, why did the bird do that? And I think Court, the bird attacked him. He really maliciously ripped at his face, because bird of prey, their claws. I remember reading, they have really lots of pounds per pressure with their claws, and then he savagely, mangled Court, but Court was still going, but the bird somehow survived in that second onslaught. And then he was crushed, but he gave his life. And I remember thinking, Court was like, "How did you do that?" And basically he said, I befriended the bird. That's what Roland's answer was. He said, he was my friend. And that was kind of the explanation of how he did it. And that was kind of heartbreaking, like you said. But now he's a gunslinger. He said he would mourn the bird, and every year on that day he would shoot his pistols into the sky. I thought that was a nice little memorial tribute. They did go into some detail there, but that's how he became the gunslinger. And so we come back to the present, and this part of the chapter, again, Stephen King says it outright. We're about to have the slow mutants attack us. So I don't know if you knew what these slow mutants were, but I'm like, what is this, nuclear fallout or Holocaust?
Pretty much, yes. It appeared that way.
These guys were creepy, man.
They were glowing green.
And what else did they have on? They had like tentacles and bug eyes, and they looked with hatred at these light worlders, people from the light, So it's like, yikes, they used to be human. So they don't explain where they came from. There's no backstory, but again, through the gunslinger's eyes and through his, short narrative, you just feel like, wow, this must be an ugly world. Something bad happened, and not a lot of people. These are the ones who got the bad raw end of the deal. It wasn't like the people in Toll who were just living in poverty. These guys, something bad happened here, and this is the point where the gunslinger actually can give up the boy, because they're going as fast as they can, and I really love it how they're trying to get past them, and they're pumping as fast as they can on the hand car. But one of them grabs the boy, and the gunslinger even thinks, this can be it. I can just let go. And I'm rid of the boy. There won't be any questions. The man in black will know that I want to know answers. So it's kind of like, wow, but he loses the thought, and I'm really proud of him, if that's the word. I'm kind of like, he hasn't totally become this self-loathing, wretched person who's willing to just preserve himself and give up all his humanity. So I really like that part.
Yeah, and I don't really have any comments from this particular scene. It was a fun action scene, and I like how Stephen King is, sprinkling the story with just some brutal action. That's just fun to read. I didn't really glean anything from that part of the book other than there are apparently radioactive things out there, thousands of years later.
And you know what? He made another connection right after this. They went whizzing through the dark again. They got away from him, but actually, before they got away, these creatures actually blocked the railway, and so the gunslinger said, "Get down! You have to clear the railway, and I'll shoot these things." And so he was, he had a few chances to ditch the boy, and he didn't. So again, proud of him. I'm proud of him there.
Josh, I just referenced my notes here. I actually did have a point here that I had written down, and at this point in the story, to me, I started to think, and this is, you can't directly correlate these two, but this story for the gunslinger started to feel a bit like a Pilgrim's Progress, in that, I already said it felt like he was going with the flow, and he was required, he had to go on this journey, right? He was headed towards the tower, and he has to go through all these trials and tribulations, and he has to make these moral and ethical decisions about the boy on his way to getting to the tower, and it's all part of his journey, and it's all shaping him in a certain way. And there's no direct correlation between those two stories, but it just felt that way to me.
And we'll find out. We'll eventually quit teasing, because there's a resolution right up ahead, and it actually addresses the significance or the meaning. This just wasn't his own internal conflict. His partner Jake has a larger significance to the story, and it's kind of subtle, but it's explicitly stated, and we're about to get there, because they're coming up on light. It's the end of the tunnel. Not really. It's the subway station. So I don't know. They come to a transit point with a bunch of railways converging. That's where they saw the subway. They saw, you get the tidbits with the abandoned stores or the underground shopping area right next to the platform or the station, and guys who are mummified in their outfits, so they were probably gassed. And again, Roland says this was I've heard of this. This is like a biological agent or something from forgotten armies, from forgotten countries and eras. And I'm like, holy cow, because it is weird to find all this infrastructure under this mountain. It's a subway, and this is the first time somebody's just got to conk me on the head, because I was like, oh, this is a real subway. This isn't just another world. This is kind of like Earth. And they made those connections. It's just, I was waiting for someone to spell it out for me, and it kind of got spelled out right here. And then after that, they reach the end of the line, pun intended. There's a huge abyss right there. The tracks go out into the abyss, and they're thousands of years old, so they abandoned the handcar, and they're walking along these rails over this probably an ocean or the river below them, thousands of feet. And this is the part where they actually see the real pinpoint of light, and this is the end right here. They're about 90 yards out, and they've made it, and the boy's still with them. And then guess who shows up? Mr. Jokester, the man in black, says, "Hello, fellas." So it's like this dire situation, and then you got this maniac who basically is taunting them. And this is and when he actually says "Hello, fellas," it makes the boy it freaks him out, and they get shocked, and he falls down. He's dangling over the edge. And this for me was an interesting part, John. It kind of was an easy way, an easy ultimatum, I guess you would call it. You have a falling down rail track over this abyss, held up by a rickety lattice work structure. The boy hanging over the edge, and the man in black says, "If you don't come with me now, or if you don't quit playing games and come here and leave the boy, then you'll never get your answers. I'm gone." And the gunslinger doesn't think too much. He basically does a catapult, and the language is beautiful because he knows he's damning the boy. It basically says he jumped, he leaped, his hand found the rocky, lighted lip of damnation, and behind him, in the dreadful silence, the boy spoke way below him or far behind him. And the last thing the boy said, Jake said, was, "Go then. There are other other worlds than these," which is a little mysterious. I don't know if what'd you pick up? What does that mean? What does that mean?
I didn't. I have no idea. I mean, we just have to keep reading the series and find out. But he let the boy fall, and then you could kind of feel that moment where it was silent and the boy's falling, and I just said, he
hates
went
himself
with that decision. Yeah.
The gunslinger hates himself. He lets his guns do the talking again. He's outside.
Well, that's what he was supposed to do. That's really what he was supposed to do.
According to what? A higher good power or a higher evil power?
Well, on this journey he's on to the Dark Tower, I mean, he had to. The boy was the gateway to the man in black, and he had to make this decision in order to get his answers, right? I mean, that was it, and it's just like, wow, he's trapped,
And that's the moral quandary. But like I said, he kind of had an easy ultimatum: is either fall into the abyss with him or jump out. And he does crack off 12 shots at the man in black when he gets outside, and he's laughing at him. He says, I mean, he basically, this is where it gets good. This is the end of the podcast. We have to talk about the huge reveal because it's not done yet. There's a lot here. My eyes almost fell out of my head because I was like, this story has a huge scope, and that key, that the sacrifice of Jake was essential to the gunslinger going further. Why? Because it doesn't explain. It says, if the sacrifice of the boy and the law will allow me to help you. The man in black does help him, give him a lot of information, but let's actually go through it sequence by sequence. And he's laughing at him, so there's this kind of tension between the two. It's like two adversaries. And he says, "We make great magic together, you and I." He says, "You kill me no more than you kill yourself." So after the gunslinger shoots at him, he says this really cryptic thing, and then it gets more and more interesting. They actually, it's a pretty cool setting where they palather. I'm going to say palather.
They palather, and the gunslinger just has to drop his guard.
He does.
He can't do anything. He can't.
He can't hurt him. But they go to the Golgotha. I love it. It's called the Place of the Skull. It's a graveyard of animal bones. So if you can imagine the setting, it's really cool. And this is literally a culmination of years of hunting this man. And in reading it, I have a lot of anticipation and expectation too, because I'm like, okay, is there a big payoff here? What? Roland has literally sold his soul here, right? He's done a lot of bad things, the most recent of which was 5 minutes ago. So can Stephen King craft an interesting showdown between these two? The answer is yes. I mean, really, yes, and there's so much more that happens here.
He does, and he draws in. I picked up on more things about religion right here in this scene. One of them being the fact that they call this place Golgotha, which is the hill on which Christ was crucified in the Bible. Okay,
right.
There's one right there. My spidey senses were going off as soon as I saw that word in the book. But then, as the man in black is showing him things, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but he's showing the universe really to Roland, and the light. There's so much light, it's about to kill Roland. Again, right back to things you might know from the Bible, to look on God in all his glory and that brightness. He's light. would kill a human being. So again, all those, Stephen King never actually directly says anything, but just that concept, the fact that it was called Golgotha, all those things kind of came together. So I'm wondering myself, what are we trying to learn here about the supreme being over everything here? Because Stephen King acknowledges in the book there is some sort of supreme being here, right, Josh?
Oh, without a doubt. When the Man in Black says, "Let there be light," and then all the sea and the earth start coming up around him, it was like Genesis. And it's funny because there's even more. There's actually, yes, let's get to the actual what the tower is, because there is the payoff. It's not only seeing what the universe is, or maybe traveling in it in this ultimate power, but it's what the Dark Tower represents. And here's what it is. We get the Black Man in Black with his terror.
The Black Man in Black. Okay, sorry.
The Black Man in Black.
What?
If they ever make a movie about this, it will be a Black Man in Black. But he gets tarot cards, and it's kind of like, okay, tarot cards and all this mumbo jumbo. It's really frustrating the Gunslinger.
I think it's tarot cards.
Tarot cards, tarot. Basically psychic, mumbo jumbo garbage, which I don't buy into at all.
Leather.
But it frustrates the Gunslinger. That's when he lunges at the Man in Black. So we have this whole tension building, but we gotta get to the good part, because what they do is they drop all pretense, because the Gunslinger wants answers, and the Man in Black's just messing with him. But when he lunges at him, that's when everything goes black. And then the Man in Black says, "Let there be light." And then you have the Genesis scene. He's going through the universe. So basically, the Man in Black is taking him through the universe, through all of creation, through the solar system, through the galaxy. And what he basically says is, he said that there's more than this world. There's more than this universe. And this is not a new concept of, what if we were just on a blade of grass? What if there was thousands of universes, like in the sand, and if you kicked it with your boot, you would destroy thousands of worlds. Not just worlds, but thousands of universes. What if all these little worlds exist? And basically, this whole time in the book, when they keep referring to the world has moved on, the Man in Black basically alludes to the fact, what if this has happened to our universe? What if there was a alien universe where they mowed the grass, or they cut down the grass, and we're dying, we're withering away, and we're the end of the world. So there's a lot. I mean, you get this whole philosophical concept that a lot of people, a lot of science fiction tropes kind of has said, hey, what if we're just a tear in a giant's eye, right?
But so that's great that he combined it here. I liked one of the quotes that he made here, and that is referring to the past, and again, this being far into the future. He said that at one point man had achieved such technological greatness that they were able to chip away at the mighty pillar that is reality. All that technological greatness, and they still barely chipped away at the reality of their situation. I thought that was a great quote that Stephen King put in there.
Thank you for mentioning that point, because that actually solidified that this is the future Earth. There were civilizations that conquered cancer, that basically went to the moon and did all these other things, but they still didn't understand the meaning of life and the universe itself, and they went away.
He said they had all this knowledge, but they didn't actually achieve true understanding.
Exactly.
I think it was something like that, but that's the right concept.
So here's where it gets interesting. This whole concept is laid out in front of Roland. He's like, I don't believe it. He basically was like, this doesn't mean anything to me. So the Man in Black says, well, here's why you're important. He said that there's never been a mind like yours in the history of the world, perhaps in the history of creation. He says he has a slow, prodding, tenacious mind. He gets a hold of something, he can't let go, right? And we've seen that. And basically all the cards are on the table now. So why does he tell him that? Because Roland is perfectly suited to find the Dark Tower. So what is the Dark Tower? Drum roll.
Okay. Oh, there you actually have one. Okay, good. We need a soundboard.
We need a soundboard with real sound effects. But until then, we're thankfully told what the Dark Tower is. It's not a huge cliffhanger. It's basically the Dark Man. That's his third nickname. The Man in Black says, Suppose that all worlds, all universes met in a single nexus, a single pylon, a tower, and within that there's a stairway to the Godhead itself. So could you climb that tower? What would be there? Would there be a room? So this basically the mind-blowing concept of billions of universes, infinites out there, which blows your mind. But there's a single nexus for all those, and it's the tower. What exists there? Is there a God there? And it's like, whoa. So why do you even tell them all this? You still have to keep digging. It's like, well, okay, Man in Black, what's your role? The bottom line is it goes back to the boy who was sacrificed. That and the fact that it's part of the law, whatever the law is. He says it's the law. I have to help you. So they are both.
Josh, I have a whole different take on that. As far as what the Man in Black's purpose was, he said he was a minion. He was the first minion that comes of the king. And what I gathered from this was that, well, no, he actually told Roland. He said, "You are," in not so many words. He said, "You are my greatest achievement." Right? He's like, did he call him his magnum opus? Or I don't remember what he said.
That's right. Yeah.
He said, "You are my greatest achievement." And here's what I put together from that. Roland is on this journey. He's supposed to be on this journey. He's supposed to be headed to find the Dark Tower. That's his destiny. It's his pilgrim's progress. The Man in Black is there not to help him along his way, but his whole purpose over the hundreds and thousands of years the Man in Black was alive, his whole purpose was to shape Roland into who he becomes up until that point in time when the Man in Black reveals everything to him.
Wow.
The boy was the gate to the Man in Black, because if Roland had decided to save the boy, right, then the Man in Black would not have achieved his ultimate goal of Roland as he is when we end the book. And so that, to me, I gathered that was his whole purpose, and it took hundreds and hundreds of years to shape Roland into that. To go along that journey. I may be off base there, but that just made sense to me.
That just blew my mind, and that's very true. We forgot that little nugget. Again, all these little things that are laid out in this one conversation, that ends up lasting 10 years. It really does. They're at the campsite fire, and they talk, and when he wakes up, it's been 10 years later. But within that conversation, they talk about they're near immortal. So you're right. We talked, we briefly talked about how long has he been chasing them? We don't really know. But the fact that you said that the Man in Black's magnum opus, as the servant of the King of the Tower, which is who he serves, and we don't know who the King of the Tower is. But you're right. He was to shape the Gunslinger. That totally makes sense. But for what? For what? Is he a weapon for good or a weapon for evil? There is that still mystery of who's guiding him. Is he being manipulated like a puppet? And can he sit here and have his own manifest destiny and sit here and destroy evil, if it's evil that's killing his world, or if he's the only hope for the world and they're trying to make him lose his humanity? I'm sitting here just trying to get all philosophical because it's very enticing to find out this man who's so tenacious, and he's fighting for his soul, I think, as well as for the world. And I like this guy. I want him to find the tower. I want to know what's at the top of the stairs. And you know what? The Man in Black basically says, okay, you have to go and you have to do this. And basically, it's the center of creation, I guess, for all intents and purposes. And to get there to meet the king, and the Man in Black gets a little scared. He doesn't want to really answer some questions like, what's at the top? Is God up there? Or has anybody dared to go up there? But basically, the Man in Black says you have to meet the king and to find these answers, you have to meet the ageless stranger. His name is Legion. And at the end, it comes rushing at you. He's going to have to go to the west, to the sea, to the end of the world to find the three. He reiterates what the oracle said. You have to find the three, and you'll be bestowed the power of the drawing. So we're throwing all this stuff at the listeners right now, but this is all thrown at the reader at the end of the book. It's like, wait a minute. Okay, I'm close to the tower. You've told me all this, but why? I don't know why, except for it's the law, and the sacrifice of the boy allowed him to get these answers. and he's going to get the drawing power, whatever the drawing power is, and he's going to find out his answers with the help of these three who sound like very eclectic characters. You know, some are murderers and some are just really weird characters based off the cryptic clues we get. So that is a whole lot to chew on, but that's the end of the book. The man in black disappears. He dies. 10 years later, when Roland is out of his talk with him, he's bones. He's gone. And Roland basically sits by the ocean, and he says he's going to be prepared for this coming battle. That's a pretty cool ending. He's like, I'm ready for this.
I just have one question for you here at the end. And it's something that Stephen King really, really needs to address in some of these other books. If Roland is more or less the last gunslinger, okay, and guns are not something that really anybody else has in the entire world except for gunslingers, right? And Roland has fired how many shots since we started the story?
18.
No, not 18, more like 80.
So I forgot the toll, sorry.
So my question is, and Stephen King may just not have thought about this, maybe it will be addressed later. I don't ever hear anything about Roland taking his empty cartridges and reloading rounds. Where is he getting all this ammunition? Is he carrying it? You can only carry maybe a couple hundred rounds at most on your person, especially without, you know, like the modern day stuff we have. So if he's got a gun belt or some kind of ammo belt, he's only going to be able to carry so many, and he's already shot quite a few. And I have no concept of how he's getting more rounds for his pistols. You know, reloading the cartridges would be one way, but you don't hear about that. I mean, he just seems to keep pulling rounds from somewhere, and I don't really know where he's getting them. So, not a plot hole, but that detail needs to be filled in for me, because everything else has been very believable and cool up until I realized, hey, wait a minute. How is he doing that?
He's going to have to find an armory at the other side of the ocean. We know where he's headed, so hopefully there's an armory there, or magic bullets. But that's a good point. That's a really good point. So the Gunslinger, we find out, pretty cool concept, Dark Tower, nexus of all the universes ever. So is it going to be good enough to go through all 7 books? Yeah. I heard book 2 is awesome. Book 4 is awesome. Book 7 is awesome. Basically, it's a solid story. We're going to finish it soon, and we will put on our schedule, on the Rain of Book schedule, when we're going to pick up book 2. But next book, if anybody's interested, we have reviews on this. So go to rainofbooks.com or go to youtube.com/rainofbooks, and you can check out our video reviews on the Gunslinger. And our next book coming up is a totally different genre, and that's another awesome loner. This dude has his own two-handed pistols with his artificial intelligence guiding him to save the world. I am speaking of none other than Halo and the Master Chief, who is the one super soldier who can save us all from the onslaught of the Covenant. So Halo: The Fall of Reach is next week in August. So we'll check you out. That's our next summer read. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good weekend.